Hello everyone, welcome to another reaction. We're going to be doing something new. You've probably seen the different variety of reactions. There's actually quite a lot of a backlog of reactions that will be coming out. I've kind of broken it down now. Instead of doing like 12-hour intervals, it will just be 1-day intervals. That way I'll just have like a massive schedule of a bunch of 1-day, different day, like every single day uploads basically. And I think that will work really fine. So I'm going to, I hope to do that. And well, I mean, not hope, but that will be the way I'll try to do it. And so here we're doing Force 13 reactions. Now that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do a reaction? I mean, people have done it before. But by interest, I want to go through and just watch the animations and thought, how can I react to it also? Because I want to like watch the animations anyways. So without further ado, I'm gonna do three of these basically animations basically, and I'm gonna try to rank them. Sort of just rank them based on the animation, the sort of graphics, and the analysis, like also which could be quite heavily weighted because I do the analysis side anyways, so I'm quite intrigued on that. And sort of going through this again, and I will pause in between everything, so I'm probably making this intro a little bit longer, but I just want to explain this, and let's go. See, I don't want to be heavily biased and rank on the music as well, because the music I think the music from every animation is actually going to be relatively, unless there's one which like really points that doesn't fit, then I might like knock a point off. But otherwise, the music is absolutely elite, so I can't really go against it. Also, this is 720p because it's an old animation, but I don't really care about old animations. I think they're cool. We got one, Typhoon 1. In June. That's actually interesting. In June we have Typhoon 1. This is the 18. Okay, I forgot to mention this as well. I just completely jumped in. This is the 1884 typhoon, Pacific typhoon season. So I did not mention that. It was 1884, but we have June typhoon, which is interesting. And one thing I want to say is old analysis, especially TCR, will limit you to having Category 1 typhoons most of the time. Move to the west side of Taiwan, near Taipei actually. Also, a lot of these typhoons are emergent, so they just randomly appear because you don't know the original tropical cyclone genesis tracks, and you don't have any sort of data set. So you can do sort of like recreation data sets based on the current known paths and landfalls and relate them, especially knowing the sort of background environments they're within and the most favored zones, and you can sort of simulate as well. But it's hard to pull off obviously in these situations, especially when you're doing animation. So obviously understandable, but in reality it is possible. Typhoon 2 in July, beginning of July. There's Hainan landfall as well. And it's quite close to Hanoi actually, that landfall. I think one of these is a very significant typhoon, because looking at 1884, I have a feeling one of these were a very significant typhoon, unless I'm thinking of this wrong. But I also think, I don't know if the 1884 is the Haiphong typhoon, maybe not, but I mean it might be. But Category 2 landfall in northern Luzon. Is that like Apayao, and then we got southern Taiwan. It's always interesting to see how the TC kind of re-emerge, and also sometimes it can sort of just dissipate as a depression over land, especially like over China mainland. Typhoon 4, Category 2. In July, late July actually. I normally base it categorically off, you'll see some pauses here, as I said, I already warned you, but early July, mid-July, late July, so you separate them by basically 10-day intervals, or so you can do 11 as well, but basically like July 10th, July 1st, like 10th, so we've got late July here, so that's interesting. Typhoon 5, early July. Late July. Okay, so between landfalls in Luzon, once again, Luzon landfall again, that's another Vietnam landfall, but tropical storm weakening. We've got another tropical cyclone. This one's recurve cyclone. Or typhoon, no, it's tropical storm, but, you know, it's going towards the Japanese islands. Amami Island, so I think luckily dissipated though. Typhoon 7, category 2 actually. So we're obviously seeing like a very limited typhoon bracket within 1 to 2 because it's obviously very difficult to know. And it's entirely possible that pre-landfall they could have been even more intense. That's always a thing, that category 4 typhoons, and they could have been like category 2 right here, which has occurred, especially with like Southwest Indian Ocean. There are different cases of that being of that existing, so it's entirely possible here. And we've got another Luzon landfall, so it's a very Luzon-based season here. I wonder if this is like almost like a neutral sort of like Enzo sort of season, because we're seeing constant Luzon, upper Luzon, and then we're seeing now more central, like central to southern Luzon, and it's still on that sort of northern trajectory, and that's pretty similar to the pre-season going into early July. So I said pre-season, I meant in season during July. That makes more sense. Got another landfall. Tropical storm 8, another recurve tropical storm in almost the same track as it was S5, I think. 9, typhoon 9, in late August as well. It's China Sea now as well, and dissipated. It's interesting how this completely vanished. So basically dissipation would have occurred somewhere around the East China Sea, because I feel like there would have been more reliable reports into South Korea if it had moved north. So it must have dissipated in the higher latitudes above 30 degrees north in the East China Sea, or it did actually cause impacts, but there are no reports here with the data that are coupled together to produce the final part of the track. Typhoon 10, once again, Luzon, category 3, category 4, and category 4 landfall as well, northern Luzon in the same area. And typhoon dissipation pretty close to Macau. This depression far inland, very far inland. Typhoon 11, another recurve. Okay, now we've got an alternate path, very similar again to the previous typhoon that moved to southern Taiwan. And moving between the straits again. I see quite interesting how some cyclones have moved between the straits, and this one's interesting because you've got a track that's going through Luzon, then it goes westwards. So you've got like a Typhoon Krathon type of path going through southern Taiwan. So that's it's in September. So that's sort of interesting because early season you don't see that all too much, but later seasons you start to see this sort of variability, and it comes to exist here as well. Okay, we've got like basically no October activity, or at least anything that was existing was recurved, and now we've got into mid-November, so it's interesting. And now we've got a completely different track. We've got now Visayas, we've got Typhoon 12, and heavily landfalling, obviously between the islands. And now Vietnam again, once again. Okay, so it weakened on landfall again. This is more southerly track. Typhoon 13, Luzon again, which is southern Luzon, and this is almost a hallmark. Late season November typhoons, they drift southwards and then they almost dissipate into the South China Sea, or they eventually drift towards Vietnam, or they go upwards around Luzon, out northeasterly, or they just go like basically in due north and dissipate. a very uh, specific sort of mannerism to the late season climatology in the tracks that typhoons take once they go through Luzon, especially into November. And this is like a classic example, like perfect. It's going to dissipate probably near Vietnam, I imagine. It's going southwards and it's dissipating. Yes, it's not strengthening, it's just dissipating. And it's gone. Typhoon 14 was Tropical Storm 14 going southwards as well. Getting close to Palawan actually. Okay, this is actually a very unique track. This is like actually quite a rare track. Like this is a rare track. We've got to take note of. It's gone basically due southwesterly all the way through, paralleling Palawan, and now it's going still southwards at 10 degrees latitude after making a landfall into the Visayas region. So definitely quite an odd. Southwards was sort of expected, but it's definitely interesting to see that way. It's sort of jogged southwards and just drifted. You've got a pattern that's very aggressively pushing it southwards, and it's almost like there's like a ridge, and there's like sort of convective activity to the south. Well, there's not a lot of convective activity to the south. There's sort of like suppression, because it's interesting how you just managed to get that, and because it's drifted almost all the way due south towards the Borneo Sabah region, which is interesting as well. Yeah, dissipation as well as it's going into December as well, early December. We're gonna have a late season on next new season. No, okay, all right. Yeah, 105 mile per hour. We're seeing quite a few typhoons. And of course, there's only 14 typhoons, and it's obviously going to be below average quite significantly. But it's one thing to note that there's an entire possibility that there are more reports that haven't filtered in into this sort of season. And even at low reports, obviously the intensity varies. Crossover basins, there's a lot of variability in which these early seasons, you see a clear gap in which they have so many typhoons at category 1 or a certain intensity just max, and at a certain values at category 2 is at 105 mile per hour. They're using mile per hour here, so I'll just use that for now. I typically use the knots, but I like using 90 knots here. But for convenience, we use the metric graphics displayed. And so you've got this certain set that's confined in these older seasons, and this data set's limited, and it really runs like that until we get like better climatology and data. I need to remember the word for the ancient descriptions of looking at really old hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones and seeing what they're like, if they potentially even occurred, and like what intensity might have been like very far, like long time ago. Something paleo sort of named. I forgot what it's called. But this is the season. Okay, pretty good animation. I'm gonna do. I don't really want to like. I don't know how I want to rate this, but I guess I'll just do it like as I normally do and everything. But I just rate by 10, and rating by 10, I'm gonna do based on the analysis. Yeah, I'm gonna do including the analysis, the animations, and the graphics. So primarily those three, because the music's good anyways. Like the OST, like I mean, I'm not gonna call it music because it's music, not OST. But analysis is actually pretty good. I think this is what shapes pretty well. This is pretty decent. Of course, I won't know every single typhoon and every TC, but some of these I am a bit aware of. So I'm interested in like how some of these are being written up. So I'd say pretty good analysis here. And animation, I think is fine. I think it's pretty good, old style graphic, and the graphics itself, like the display, of course, it's a little bit low resolution, but I think it's pretty good. I'm gonna say anything that's like sub 9 is like sort of, well, there are some actual holds in this, and I don't think it's gonna be like that. So I'm probably gonna go like a 9 point, like a 9 point, maybe like a 9.3. I think that's a pretty good place to put it at. It's a good animation, and it's a good analysis. I think that this is one of the good ones. All right, let's go to 1885. This animation is also relatively short. I do realize that I talk a lot more into the animations of shorter ones. All right, let's see this. Right, this should be interesting. 1885 Pacific typhoon season. It also says there, I want to look at this. Best guess analysis using information available at this time. Therefore, inaccuracies are possible. Like, this is going to be a thing. Alright, basically no early season activity until late April. That's interesting. It's definitely one of the most suppressive seasons. Yeah, it's quite a suppressive season, seeing the late April. No tropical cyclone, any sort of thing. And of course, it's a restraint again. That you don't know if there were actual other tropical cyclones with no reports. But as of yet, there's no example of it. So late April, obviously it's entirely possible to get this sort of late development. Like, this is actually quite possible because you have the West Pacific Typhoon season 2025, which was exactly like that, and that's in those sort of terms. But it's just interesting to note. But it's still not that late. I mean, it's not that late because it's still like late April, which is relatively early. So I would imagine this is probably fairly favourable season still. Perhaps a La Nina sort of season, I feel like. Because we also see a typhoon that's gone straight through and develop westwards into no recurve. Okay, you can see a fairly far tropical storm 2 recurved northerly latitudes. July as well. Slow moving tropical cyclone. It's interesting when they have slow tropical cyclones, how they measure all that data and understand there's a long time period, but this cyclone's been here for a pretty long time period. So it's got to be moving slow for that entire time period for when it's landfalling and when you're sort of measuring the first observation data. And you've got sort of like weather maps, weather plots. And if they're not, like, if you're just not seeing that change, the translation speed of these cyclones must be really slow. So it's an interesting way to, like, they must have deciphered, like, for Tropical Storm 3. And in these cases, they can intensify, but it just entirely depends on the conditions. Typhoon 4, moving westerly. Typhoon 3 intensified. Typhoon 4, Typhoon 2 now as well. Actually. It's northern Taiwan landfall, actually, near Taipei. It must have gone through Taipei. That's quite a scary scenario, actually, if you think about it. Going basically west-northwest through Taipei and going all the way up, still northwestward. So incredibly heavy precipitation potential. Typhoon 4 going major typhoon status, and again in a similar track. It's interesting when you have locked patterns. There are certainly locked patterns, and I think July is actually a great example of a locked pattern period. You get some certain cyclone tracks that exist that are focused, like within July last year, for example. You would have typhoons that went more northerly, north of Luzon. They go near Taiwan, or they have out east and a little bit of a recurve, and that sort of did exist. I think there was Typhoon Danas, which was in that same sort of time period. This one is more shifted part recurve cyclone, and then you've got now northerly, basically no sort of, it's around the ridge pattern, and you've got no real way for a cyclone to move due westerly into the South China Sea. Upper level pattern flow. It's almost like it's picked the cyclone up and moved it northwards, despite still obviously retaining this sort of barotropic environment. It's favourable. So it's not getting sheared apart at northerly latitudes, but it's going north. It's just interesting to note this sort of case. It's going to northern Taiwan, but it's obviously very, very varying. So you've got not the identical track, but it's pretty similar pattern. That is late July. Another cyclone, Typhoon 5, into fairly north latitude, around 23 degrees north, moving due westerly towards Taiwan once again. weakened on landfall. Typhoon 6 is an interesting one actually. That's a different change of pattern. Mid-August, you got South China Sea. Obviously, erratic path. South China Sea sort of developing typhoons was actually pretty rare, and the fact that it's going due northerly is going to be a very erratic track as soon as you have a situation like that. That's really interesting to see that. Typhoon 7. Basically, PAR region typhoon again. Looking more due westerly finally. There we go. Like, starting to see more due westerly tracks going through southern Taiwan. Those situations are not great. As soon as you have southern Taiwan, you've got now the entire quadrant of the largest cyclone region, especially the northeast, going constantly over the mountain range, and yeah, you got regions like, for example, at Typhoon again, you had Hualien City in a perfect region, and you had a very high precipitation outlook that was exceeding like several hundred millimeters, over 1,000 potentially, of just constant rainfall, even post cyclone. The cyclone sort of gets eviscerated, especially its core region, but then now you have like an axis of convection, and you have new reforming convection constantly over the mountain. Typhoon 8, recurve cyclone into late September now. Major typhoon. Still into late September, weakening as well into early October. Very long-lived cyclone dissipated in early October. Sort of moved. Interesting how it's just different sort of tracks. These sort of high latitude cyclones, you can't really understand like necessarily, because like typically if you've got a high latitude cyclone moving due westerly, of course, and then moving, it's going to eventually move poleward, as obviously by the Coriolis force, and it's going to have this propensity as it intensifies and potentially picked up by any sort of baroclinicity get lifted north, or potentially the flow of the upper level jet, the Pacific jet, which is going to be right across that area, right along that 30-degree north, and that will cause the cyclone to not be able to move as too much westerly or southwesterly. Late October potential. No, it's going to be early November. Tropical Storm 9, quite a fast moving cyclone. Category 1. This is like a classic early November track. PAR cyclone moves due westerly, then it gets lifted north and it moves up towards Luzon. Often it looks like these cyclones are about to move due west into Visayas region, and once that you'd think that it's actually not that common. So this is more likely to see this sort of recurve, but once that is occurring and it's intensifying, it moves into Luzon by that time because there's not enough time left for the cyclone. And yeah, like Typhoon Mangkhut as well, and that very active phase, including Typhoon Taraji in 2024. Right, there's certainly more intense cyclones. There's 2 majors already, but less cyclones overall. It's an interesting pattern how this changed. Alright, well, there we go. There's the second animation. Let's get into the third animation. And you're probably going to be, okay, it's going to be quite a big jump actually now to 1893. If you want to just see these animations raw and just watch them, then obviously like there will be like the channel's linked and everything. You'll be able to see them yourself. But I'm gonna sort of watch it in the way that I'm trying to pause, but also like play it and watch it as well at the same time. Because I want to imagine what the situation is as if you're tracking the cyclone itself, the sort of discussion points and different interesting things. Because plainly you can obviously watch the animation without me saying so as well. 1893, so this is about 8 years. slightly better graphic already. Typhoon 1 near Palawan Island landfall already. Early May. Very aggressive pattern. This looks like an active season already. Moving to Gulf of Tonkin, Typhoon 1 landfall into northern Taiwan. Another typhoon landfall into Visayas, going to start moving northerly, still strengthening, sustaining potential typhoon status again, sustained typhoon status again. It's done the quite odd path. It's gone northwest, north, and then east. That's actually quite interesting. Like Typhoon Komei last year had this situation with the cyclone. Basically, the evolution of the cyclone was moving due westerly, and then it got caught in this pattern where it's almost like there's like an eddy sort of pattern. Once this, it doesn't really occur anywhere else, unless except for the propensity at these higher latitudes, that you can get this sort of unusual recurve pattern, but especially near northern Luzon, where the cyclone may stall as it's weakening and it's affected circulation as it moves past the big bulk of Luzon and the mountains, the Sierra, and then you've got basically a weakening cyclone, and then it's got a complete alternate pattern shift in that same time period, and so you've got stalling, it's going to stall, and then now you've got recurve, so it's going to have some sort of probably baroclinic environment, or again the 200 millibar jet now creating a southwesterly strong flow and it's pushing the cyclone all the way towards the northeast. So it's a unique situation. Certainly a rare track, and it's in May as well. And then moving due north and towards Japan. Into June now as well. Late June, I think. It's going to be a late June pattern here. Okay, Tropical Storm 3 into the South China Sea. Develops pretty quickly into Category 1 typhoon near southern Hainan Island. And then it's gone near I think it's the Guangzhou province, if I'm correct. Might be right, I don't know. I think no, it's not going to be there. But Guangzhou province, I believe, is close to that region. It was Typhoon 4 now into the northern latitudes. Moving westwards, yeah. I mean, it's going to be pretty. It's July. It's a mid-July pattern, so early July, mid-July, sort of the same sort of pattern. Once again, you've got this northerly cyclone track, basically going due north. This is a high sort of latitude tropical cyclone genesis, potentially, as it was already the icon developed. You could sort of interpret that, and it's going to move due north into the East China Sea, and in most cases, paralleling the coast. But of course, with this sort of cyclone track, this track is now favouring more westerly, and that westerly obviously leads to landfall because you're getting closer to the landmass. Another northern Luzon. I mean, regardless of any pattern that happens, you have to account for variability always for the northern Luzon. It's the typhoon, the cyclone capital of the world, and then like obviously you got Madagascar, which is the southern hemisphere capital of the world, but this is like a hotspot regardless. In July, this does account, like this occur. I don't remember it all too recently. This sort of occurring in July, sort of in this sort of mid-July pattern. I don't remember July sort of pattern favouring Luzon landfall. I can't really think of much. There was Typhoon Agon, which I believe 2024, and it paralleled and moved due north. And then it recurved northeast. That was a May pattern. So, not really. It's interesting. Southern Taiwan. So the pattern's still somewhat similar because you've got this new northerly track. It's almost like there's a barrier to the South China Sea because the cyclone's moving due north, and then it's going to go towards southern Taiwan in that instance as well. Seeing a lot of southern Taiwan landfalls actually. And most of them a lot of these actually have appeared from south and to the south or the southeast, and moving near north, just basically near due north. And this typhoon actually recovered its typhoon structure. Well, it made a landfall in southeast Taiwan, so the chances of a cyclone retaining 64 knot Category 1 sort of typhoon intensity. As it crosses through the strait, is actually a lot higher because the terrain is much drastically different. You've got much more flat land in the south. Typhoon 6 into sort of northerly track again. Yeah, almost the identical track. That's almost identical within within the similar pattern in July. It's quite interesting. Repeat patterns, and again, Typhoon 7 moving northerly, just more due north, and recurve basically due north. Pretty similar to the pattern earlier. Tropical Typhoon 8 again wants the same pattern again in early August. This is very interesting. This is actually a very extended period because we just saw like almost into like early August where you saw the typhoon get close to move due westerly, made a landfall into eastern China, south of Shanghai. But you've got a very similar track, and it's going all the way into mid-August now. A similar track. There's a very long locked-in pattern, and you can have these long phases of locked-in patterns, especially into the early seasons, into July, August, even into like following June as well. But this sort of northerly latitude sort of typhoon track, a very vulnerable period actually for the Taiwan sort of region, Okinawa, southern Japanese islands, and to eastern China, and it sort of followed through last year as well. You got to see that quite significantly. Tropical Storm 9, it was more just going to recurve. Typhoon 9. There's not much recurve going on. It's actually moving due northerly, but it dissipated due northerly. You see how none of that was par. Like there's literally no par cyclone region developments. Pretty northerly latitude, so somewhat you'd think that these cyclones were relatively close latitude, like in region in which the tropical cyclone genesis occurred, as opposed to likely being much farther east. Having a high latitude easterly cyclone that's moving all the way due westerly is actually very rare. Like, you're not going to see that all too often. 20 odd degrees latitude north and due westerly all the way to Taiwan. It's not a common thing. You don't see that very often. Tropical Storm 10 into late August, early September. South China Sea development as well. I honestly, if I get proven wrong with a cyclone track or a certain cyclone thing, I'm not expecting it, then that's interesting. Like that's going to be really interesting to see how that's completely changed the sort of concept that I was thinking of originally, and completely dynamic, unique sort of pattern and like what's going on. Okay, Typhoon 11, major typhoon near the Batanes Islands. It's just barely missed landfall. Might have even made landfall direct hit. Weakening on landfall. Again, near, I think that's pretty close to Macau. Typhoon 12 in similar pattern as well. I almost feel like this, like, this might be an Enzo pattern. This might be positive Enzo. This might be very strongly northerly latitude developments, cyclone genesis, and constantly due north. I think eventually this pattern might change over, but this is quite a stubborn and unique sort of pattern. It's almost like this strong southwesterly flow constantly over the Philippine island region, which is what happened last year. May also be a product of strong MGO phase. Tropical Storm, Tropical Depression 13 against in similar pattern as well. Southern Taiwan landfall. It retains its intensity, relatively intense, as in it makes it into a strait. Does not weaken to depression state. South China Sea development once again. Typhoon development due westerly, very erratic path, and makes landfall in China. Typhoon 15. Okay, there we go. First Luzon path, late September, just weakening on landfall. Interestingly, moving due westerly. And into the Gulf of Tonkin. Typhoon 16, category 4, heavily landfall again. So we've just seen a complete pattern change within that time. That I was just saying that we should see a pattern change, obviously a little bit more quicker onset into late September and late October. Dual typhoons, Typhoon 16. Again, now this is a very unique, again, locked-in pattern. Seeing a lot of locked-in patterns here actually, because now we're seeing due westerly now into Luzon, and westerly north into the Luzon Strait, and then towards the Gulf of Tonkin, or basically near north of Hainan Island. It isn't making landfall into northern Hainan, but it's going due north. So again, another quite a specific pattern. And there's also bouts of phases. It's not like a unique single cyclone. There's some sort of bouts of phases with this sort of active pattern, multiple cyclones constantly in that active period. So you get active tropical waves within this pattern change. Also sort of makes evidence for it. Category 3, Typhoon 17 moving southwesterly actually. That's quite interesting. Seeing a southwesterly typhoon that actually splits the gap between southern Taiwan. It's quite a unique situation. Once again, it's resulted in landfall in almost the same region. Like this region has got heavily bombarded in 1893 into the late September, early October. Like that's a lot of typhoon impacts into that specific region in Guangdong province, into the Gulf of Tonkin, into northern Vietnam, southern China. Finally seeing some recurve typhoons high latitudes. Japanese islands, Okinawa, I believe, potentially. November pattern, South China Sea potentially, or yeah, into new Typhoon 19, fairly southern pattern. Again, classic. You got southern Visayas into November, completely different pattern change once again, and now it's moving through the straits, still intensifying, retaining intensity. Last year this happened, but in this instance it's weakening and moving due southerly. It's actually moving very far south, very far south, towards southern Vietnam tip. That's that's quite interesting how close that got to southern Vietnam. Even for just tropical depression status, I don't see that very often. Yeah, so that's very interesting. Also, basically how the cyclone relates to almost the last year, where we had a cyclone that moved due westerly, but this instance it weakened. This almost shows you an effect with old sort of pre-industrial periods, with how these cyclones are not necessarily the most favourable environmental conditions. They're bad cheer and relatively warmer retaining sea surface temperatures, because it's quite southerly latitude, around 10 degrees, just above 10 degrees flat. Actually, no, I think it's about 10 degrees, and south actually. It's still not favourable, whereas last year it was. Typhoon 20 moving pretty close, and landfall into the Visayas region again. Typhoon intensifying. There have been 20 typhoons recorded this season as well. Interesting to notice. Weakens. Okay, now we've seen the classic sort of style analysis. Couple of intensity. Okay, so we've actually got a measurement. Typhoon 16, 939 millibars. Interesting, pretty precious, like some sort of station recorded pressure. 15 miles per hour. So about 3 typhoons major again. It's quite interesting. I'm seeing a lot more typhoons here. We've even got. I think this would make more sense seeing precipitation records. People recording the precipitation amounts. Probably more expected. We've got 300 millibar measurements. Okay, it's fascinating. I mean, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. It's going to be. I don't think did I rate the previous season animation too. I don't think I did. I'll do both now. I thought animation 2 was pretty good. It was pretty similar to the first one. I'd probably say 9.3 once again. This one I think is a little bit better. I think there's just a little bit of tinge with the graphics that's slightly better. Overall, it was pretty similar. I'd probably just give it a 9.4 just about. But good animation, good analysis. I think this is pretty interesting. I don't remember all too well 1893, although there might be an odd cyclone on the two that I do remember, especially in some of these early seasons. And I mean, that's why I'm interested to see these patterns and cyclones. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next time. I'll do 3 animations. See you then.